So you have read the rulebook and now itching to actually play the game. But how? When you look for players online or in real life, you find that people are expecting different things in terms of organization. In this video, I will tell you about 5 ways to play any RPG, not just GURPS, their advantages and disadvantages, and in some cases even GURPS related specifics. If you are a new player, then I hope that this video will help you find the perfect way for you to play. I believe that there are 5 ways to play an RPG. In person, online text, online voice, play by post and solo. Let's start with the traditional way, playing the game in person. This is probably what you imagine playing an RPG is like. The GM and the players gather in the same place, be it a room, a basement or a gaming store, sit around the table, roll the dice and have fun. I have to confess, I have never played GURPS in person, but I have played D&D this way. When you are playing with friends, it's hard not to have a good time. I do not know if I would be up for playing GURPS with strangers in person, but on the other hand, it could be a good way to make friends. Anyway, if you can play in person, please try. I promise that you will have a great time and create some fond memories. After all, even though I have played D&D in person the last time 15 years ago, I still remember these games fondly. If I had to list the upsides, I would say that this feels very, for the lack of a better word, authentic and personal. But there are downsides as well. First and foremost, you must have players in your local area. This can be difficult even for popular systems such as D&D or Pathfinder, and finding GURPS players might be much more difficult. For example, I live in a city where it's probably impossible to find a group. My only real-life friend who plays GURPS has moved to another city and now lives literally 5,000 kilometers away from me. The second downside is logistics. Not only you have to solve any scheduling problems, but these problems also become exaggerated when travel time is important. Not everyone can devote several hours of his or her weekend to drive to your place, play a game and then drive back home. The third problem is GURPS specific, battle mats. When I was playing D&D in person, I just used a sheet of graph paper, a pencil and an eraser to draw maps. GURPS uses a hex grid, making things much more difficult. So you will have to play out combat in the theater of the mind, or use a computer with a mapping software, or procure a hex grid battle mat. The second and third ways are playing online, but they use different media. Online play can be done in multiple ways, but I am going to talk about synchronous play using a virtual tabletop platform, such as MapTools, Roll20 or Foundry. As always, I have to mention that Foundry has great GURPS support. The GM organizes the game and then decides whether this game is going to use voice or text. I feel that these two options make the game very different, so I consider them two separate ways to play. In a voice game, the GM and the players obviously are in a voice call and use voice to roleplay and declare actions. In the past, people used TeamSpeak and similar software, but nowadays almost everyone uses Discord, I think at least. I think some people even use their cameras, but personally I do not see the point of that. In text games, the GM and the players are typing everything in chat. The main advantage is that you can play with anyone from all around the world. Scheduling becomes easier because there's no travel time. However, easier does not mean that you won't have any scheduling problems. For example, due to my time zone, it is more convenient for me when the other players are either close to my time zone or are on the opposite side of the planet. Anything in between just doesn't work. There is no need for any physical products such as dice or battle mats. Everything is digital. However, you might need other physical products such as a good microphone. The common downside is that not everyone has a stable internet connection. And now I would like to talk about why voice and text are entirely different experiences. I might be biased, but in my opinion, text games are strictly superior to voice games. First, I am not a native English speaker, and some people have trouble understanding my accent. Second, text games provide a nice backlog that you can look up at any moment for anything you could have forgotten. Third, text games are better at multi-threading, as you can have different things happening to different characters, whereas in voice games nobody can do anything while the GM and the other player are talking. While this seems counterintuitive at first, but I firmly believe that text games are faster than voice games. There are exceptions though. One of the players from my gaming group is a notoriously slow typer. I also believe that you can be much more descriptive in text than in voice. In my general experience, text games are just easier to manage and to follow. But sometimes there can be situations when you just cannot get a group together at the same time even online. Maybe your work schedule is very unstable, or maybe all your friends simply cannot synchronize with you. It happens. Then you might want to try the fourth way, play by post. You can use a forum or open up a Discord server for this purpose, anything works. It works the same way an online text game does, but asynchronously. The GM might make a post and get a reaction from the players only several hours or days later. While this seems underwhelming, I have a lot of play-by-post experience, both good and bad, and I can list all the pros and cons. You can play with people from different time zones more easily. For example, while I was able to play real-time online games with people from the opposite side of the planet, I could not schedule a game to play with anyone between those two extremes. Still, if you have players with very different periods of activity, physical distance can become an issue even in play-by-post games. For example, I can only post during the day, while one player can only post when I am asleep. This can affect the pacing negatively. You can even use the phone to play. That's what I used to do. I used to play during my free time at work. Sure, typing long posts can be a nuisance, but in my experience it's not very limiting. However, when a tactical map is required, I had to bust out a sticky note and a pencil, then take pictures. Not very convenient, but it did not come up very often. You can participate in multiple games at the same time. If you can handle that, then go ahead. It's a good environment to learn the system's rules. I find it much more simple to explain various rules or even teach the system in play-by-post games than in real-life games, where explanations and questions take time from everyone around the table. You can also play non-RPG games this way. Some board games, war games, play-by-post strategy games are more than possible this way. After all, it all stems from play-by-email games. If you are always omitting rules that make the game more complex and or would take a lot of time, now you can go all out. You have all the time you want. This is especially important for GURPS games. Now you can track armor damage, weapon breakage, long-term fatigue, etc. without taking away from the session by looking up various tables and making calculations. There are some parts that I'm not sure if they are pros or cons. Continuous gameplay. No need to schedule 1 or 2 games per week, for example. You can play whenever you want, at a pace that you and the players are comfortable with. However, sometimes this can make you or the players burn out. Be careful with the pacing. For example, when I used to run play-by-post games, I did not post anything on weekends. I could, but I just needed a break. Many claim that the play-by-post environment facilitates a heavy role-playing game. I agree, it can do that, but mindless hack and slash is quite possible too, so I am not going to put this under pros. You can split the party. If some character clashes with another or if the situation demands it, you can split the party, where you would probably have to find a way to keep people together in a real-time game. This is more simple when the two parties become independent. They are not going to interact with each other in any way. But if they are still expected to interact or act in the same general place, Then the GM will have to keep a calendar to prevent time paradoxes. This might affect pacing if one party is not content with waiting for the other to catch up. And there are some downsides as well, of course. The first one is the most obvious one: slow tempo, especially during combat. If you cannot handle waiting hours, if not days, for your action to be resolved, then play-by-post games are not for you. However, sometimes when all people are active and present, the game can speed up greatly, being on par with real-time online games. The second problem is flaking players. Not everyone can commit themselves to playing a play-by-post game that will take months, if not years. On the other hand, it is only a problem if done out of nowhere. If a player is tired, bored, or is not content with the game and wants to leave, that's absolutely okay. The third problem is flaking GMs. Same as above, but it happens much more often. Many a game starts with an enthusiastic GM whose enthusiasm runs out 3 posts in, and then radio silence. That's probably what gives play-by-post games a bad name. And the fourth one is system adjustments. Sometimes some parts of the system have to be adjusted. For example, if some trait works only once per session, then what is considered to be a session? Luckily, GURPS has the game time enhancement in GURPS powers that takes care of that, but other systems might not be this lucky. Also, actions and reactions that can interrupt another's action slow things down. Don't be hasty with resolving such actions. In GURPS, this is mostly the matter of active defenses, but in D&D 3.5, be wary of immediate actions. I think that's all about the actual gameplay, but there has to be something to say about the game structure and the characters too. Do not take it as an absolute truth. All GMs are different, I am just relaying my experience. NPCs are more important in play-by-post games than in real-time games. At least it feels that way to me. When you as a GM have more time on your hands, you can detail the NPCs better than you would in a real-time game. And in my experience, the players interact with the NPCs much more often in play-by-post games. Character retirement is absolutely okay. If the character has accomplished their goals, the character can be retired. I do not consider this to be a case of, you just want to make another build. And the third one is keeping a sub-forum or a Discord channel with notes is advised. The game takes a while, so it's easy to forget what was the name of that village blacksmith or whatever. If you'd like to try play-by-post out, I suggest using Discord. Not everybody likes Discord, and that's understandable. I'm sure that there are many good alternatives, but Discord has an upper hand in one thing: Pseudobot, a bot that has many functions that make playing GURPS much easier. Make sure to invite the bot to your server. First, you should create an out-of-character channel, where all out-of-character conversations are going to transpire. If everything is kept in the same channel, things become very confusing very fast. Some people create a separate channel for roles and other bot commands, but I consider this optional. Then you will need an in-character channel, where the actual gameplay is going to be, including in-character conversations. If you are hosting 2 or more parties, you might want to create 2 or more channels. If your PCs tend to go off alone, splitting off from the party, it will be reasonable to create a common in-character channel and separate in-character channels for each character. If you want to keep these channels private, you can assign each player a role on Discord that will prevent him from reading any channels that you do not want him to read. A channel for notes is crucial. It usually contains such things as the current date, time, and weather, which is extremely important if you split the party to avoid time paradoxes. Current HP, FP, other resources of the combatants, turn order in combat. It could also contain various information that is always forgotten, names of the NPCs and locations, notes about the current quest, or even the current map for the ongoing combat. Sometimes it is reasonable to create a channel where recaps are posted, just as a reminder of past events. Finally, you should have a channel for character sheets, so you can find them quickly. And I think that's all. I hope that was helpful. And I would also like to mention a fifth way, playing solo. Solo play became much more widespread lately, probably due to the pandemic, but it existed for many years. After all, it stems from the old wargame that had rules for solo play. This is a kind of game where you play alone, without a game master, but with an oracle, that essentially is a set of tables that dictates what is happening in the game. At least that was the definition before the existence of RPGs made for solo play, such as Iron Thorn. I haven't tried it, but I have heard good things about it, so check it out, it's free. On the other hand, even before solo role-playing was a thing, there were choose-your-own-adventure books, but that's a different matter. I have seen people asking for more solo RPGs, implying Iron Thorn-like games, and they seem to be unaware of the so-called classic way of playing with an oracle. The most well-known such oracle is Mythic Game Master Emulator. It's not free, so you'll have to buy it, but it's not exactly expensive. It has two companion books, Variations 1 and Variations 2. Honestly, I have never used Variations 1, but Variations 2 is a good one. The Adventure Crafter that I used in my video on adventure design works a little differently. I find Mythic GM Emulator to be most appealing, because it's generic, just like GURPS. It works with any system and works well whether playing a dungeon crawl, a modern investigation game, or a sci-fi game. However, I have only tried fantasy and sci-fi myself, and just like GURPS, it is easily modified for your needs. How does it work? Let me explain. You create a character as normal, or characters. There's nothing wrong with emulating NPC companions with Mythic. Then the gameplay is separated into scenes. Each scene has the following: chaos factor. This is just a number that represents the degree of control the character has over the situation. It increases if the character loses control and decreases if the previous scene was in character's control. Of course, it's all up to you, and I believe you can even disregard it entirely. However, some random events depend on the chaos factor, so it's probably not a good idea to overlook it. List of characters. This includes your character and the NPCs. This list is expanded as the game progresses, and sometimes characters get crossed off the list. List of threads. This is a list of the current plot threads or quest lines. It may start empty. If you have an idea for the starting scene, you should go with it. Otherwise, you can generate a random event using the tables provided in the book and interpret it. Depending on the result of an additional roll you have to make, the scene setup may be unchanged from what you have envisioned, altered or interrupted by a random event. Now let's talk about the events, because they comprise a large part of the game. Mythic has three components of an event. Event focus. It describes the effect of an event. For example, it may negatively affect an NPC, positively affect a PC, etc. Description. This is two words generated randomly from a table. Most of them are adjectives. This was introduced in Variations 2 and can be used independently to answer some questions. The examples are boldly historical, officially simple, and so on. We'll talk about it later. Action. Again, these two words generated randomly but from another table. One word is the action and the other is the subject. The examples are violate spirit, trick, prison, and so on. Each event needs to be interpreted in the context of the current situation. For example, if you are a sorcerer in an ancient, forgotten library, and you had to roll an event upon opening a dusty grimoire, and an event with a focus of PC negative, description frighteningly mighty, and action desert prison, could be interpreted as opening of the grimoire releasing a bound demon that attacks the character. Usually the description part isn't even required. You can do fine with just focus and action. Feel free to throw the description out. If you are having a hard time interpreting the combination, just roll a new one, nobody will judge you. A second important part of the gameplay process is the so-called fate checks. Anytime you can ask the oracle a yes or no question, such as is the room occupied, is the sword enchanted, is this a formidable foe, then you roll on the fate check table to get the result. The result is modified positively or negatively depending on how probable is the positive answer in the current situation, using game world logic as a mechanism for determination. For example, if the sword is very unlikely to be enchanted, you modify the fate check roll by -4. Then, depending on the roll, you get a no, yes, exceptional no, or exceptional yes, possibly with an addition of a random event. The chaos factor is the factor here. No and yes are easy to interpret, but their exceptional variants can be more difficult. For example, if the question was, is the sword enchanted? Then an exceptional no might mean that not only it is not enchanted, but it also of very poor quality and cannot be enchanted at all. An exceptional yes might mean that not only the sword is enchanted, but the nature of the enchantment is obvious. So the game is basically you asking yes or no question, interpreting the answers, and sometimes interpreting random events that the oracle throws your way. When there is a significant change, the scene changes, the lists are updated, the chaos factor is adjusted. Aside from that, there are description checks from variations too, that can be simplified to just rolling on the descriptor or action table. Behavior checks that are quite confusing, but will be revised in the second edition of Mythic, and statistic checks. Instead of the latter, I just roll 1d plus 9 or 1d plus 8 to determine attributes or skill levels. Worked well for me. Combat actions performed by the enemies or allies can be resolved either with a behavior check or with a combat tactic table that I will link in the description. I prefer the latter. For some reason, I have seen a lot of people claim that solo role-playing only works with narrative, rules-light systems. I haven't tried these, but in my opinion this is not true. GURPS, being a crunchy system, at least in the way I use it, seems perfect for it. You can use all the complex rules you wanted to try out without worrying about slowing down play for others. You can make characters that do not work well with allies, and so on. Things work the way you want them to work. What I found with experience is that solo role-playing works better for me when the game setting is well documented and detailed. That way you know what can be encountered where, and that makes applying game logic and interpreting oracle results much easier than when you do not know anything. On the other hand, I have heard people using solo role-playing as a form of creative writing and world building, where they start with a blank slate and fill in the details based on the oracle's results. That could work too. Another important thing is not to limit yourself to the tables in the oracle book. There's lots and lots of tables and generators that can be used for solo play, both in books for other systems, for example GURPS Dungeon Fantasy 8 treasure tables, Gary Gygax's Living Fantasy, and so on. There's also a lot of online generators such as Chaotic Shiny. And do not forget that you can always create your own tables tailored to your needs. Get creative! You can find several GURPS solo play reports on my blog under the solo tag if you want to see an example. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching and have a good day.